On today's show, we talk about me. It is the first ever edition of Ask Eddie. You'll find out my family nickname. We'll talk movies, music, video games, how I met my wife, my pets, and my glorious hockey career as a player. All that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night. Right now, we're in the offseason and looking at all 32 NHL teams and how their off seasons have gone. And I'm also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. Well, today's episode is a bit different. It's not really about the LA Kings, although we touch on the LA Kings a little bit in this episode, but it's mostly about me. And that probably sounds pretty egotistical. But this is a fun segment that I have been a part of on different radio shows I've been on, and different podcasts I've been on. And it's just a way for you guys to kind of get to know me a little bit better. And hopefully you'll like what you hear and maybe be a little bit more invested in what I have to say by knowing a little bit more about me. That's the idea anyway. And it's the off season. We try some different things. So it is the first ever edition here on Locked On LA Kings of Ask Eddie. Our first question comes from Spike in Fremont. He says, why are you a Steelers fan? What attracted you to those Yinzers? What got you into sports radio? And do you see yourself returning to that area? If so, doing what? And again, that was Spike in Fremont. I became a Steelers fan because when I was a kid, about 10 years old, the Steelers and the Pittsburgh Pirates both won world championships in the same season, 1979. I just remember that was kind of the first year, for whatever reason, I kind of really started to get into sports. And I grew up in Central California. We were about the same distance away from LA as we were San Francisco. So you had all kinds of different fans, in the town I grew up in. There was no real loyalty as far as, location, geography. Sure, there were Raiders and Rams fans and 49ers fans, but it's kind of mixed up. So I just remember, again, I was 10 years old and I watched the Steelers, I watched the Pirates, they won championships, and I decided I'm going to be a fan of those two teams for the rest of my life. And it's turned out that has kind of been the case. I've been a Steelers fan my whole life. Still am very passionate Steelers fan. The Pirates, meanwhile, they have terrible ownership and they don't try to win. They're not trying to win. And so I've decided if they're not going to care, why should I care? So my loyalty to the Pittsburgh Pirates has basically been put on hold. I don't pay attention to them anymore. And if they get a new owner and they start to spend money and act like they're trying, I may return. I may not. I don't know. I've kind of checked out on baseball a little bit, to be honest with you. I've really focused on the NFL, college football, and hockey. And baseball is kind of an afterthought. I may watch when the playoffs come around. And the NBA, I have no interest in. College basketball, I used to watch both, but I have no interest in those anymore. Anyway, so that's how I became a Steelers fan. And one of those decisions has worked out great and the other one has not worked out well at all. I've been to Pittsburgh to see the Steelers play probably 6 or 7 times. I've seen them play in other cities. Obviously, every time they come out to LA, which they will again this year against the Chargers, I'll be there watching that game, sitting next to my wife, who is a Chargers fan. So that is always an interesting thing to do. As for getting back into sports radio, I would absolutely love to do that if I get the opportunity. I am going to be doing some sports radio work coming up during the NFL season. I'm going to be doing some pregame, halftime, and postgame shows for a handful of NFL games from the Compass Media Network. I've never done any work for them before, so this will be a new endeavor for me. Hopefully they'll like what I do and want me to do more of it. So I will be getting back into some traditional sports radio broadcasting during the NFL season, and I'm excited about that. Our next question comes from Bob in North Carolina. He says, I like all your Kings memorabilia in the background. I'm sure you have some unique treasures picked up over the years. If you could only keep one Kings item from your collection, what would you choose and why? Yes, possible 2012, 2014 conflict, but I like to know people's personal grails. Awesome show as always. Go Kings Go. That was Bob in North Carolina. Well, there's a picture over my left shoulder, if you're watching on YouTube, of me, Bailey, and the Stanley Cup. As far as like pictures go, that's probably my all-time favorite picture. You can't see it, and I'm not going to tilt my camera up, but over my right shoulder, up on the wall up here, I have two pieces of memorabilia that I love. One is a rally towel from Game 6 of the 2012 Stanley Cup Final. It's framed, and it has real confetti all placed around in it from the Kings winning the cup, and the confetti came out, and I scooped it all up and put it in my pocket, and I ended up making a little kind of a piece of artwork out of it. So that's a memory that I like a lot. Next to it is a terrible towel from a Super Bowl that I went to with my Pittsburgh Steelers. They beat the Arizona Cardinals. I think it was Super Bowl 43 in Tampa. And so I bought a terrible towel from there. It says Super Bowl 43 on it. And I've got my media credentials where I was at both of those events also hanging on there as well. So those are probably my two favorite kind of pieces of memorabilia. I will say, honestly, my favorite Kings items are probably my autographed jerseys that I have. I've got a Luc Robitaille, Rob Blake, multiple Anze Kopitars, Dustin Browns, and Drew Doughty autographed jerseys. Those are probably my favorite pieces of Kings memorabilia. Ruben Guzzi Gabriel in West Covina says, I know a lot of hockey players and people in general have nicknames. Do you have a nickname that your friends and family call you? Go Kings, go, go Rain, go. That was Ruben Guzzi Gabriel in West Covina. I actually do have a family nickname that very, very few people know, and sadly, very few people call me anymore because my parents have both passed away, as have my two older siblings. So I have a few nieces and nephews that call me by this family nickname, but I see them very infrequently. So it is not often I hear someone call me Chip. Chip is my family nickname. The story goes that when I was a baby, I had very chubby cheeks, unlike now. And I looked like a chipmunk that had, like, I don't know, acorns stowed in his cheeks. So that embarrassing story that's where my family nickname comes from. So my family nickname is Chip. Adam in Pasadena says, what are your 2 or 3 favorite movies? Do you play video games? Which are your favorites? And one more, best concert you've ever been to? Good questions. I have one all-time favorite movie for a specific reason, but some of my favorite movies, I would go with Seven, Shawshank Redemption, LA Confidential. Loved those original Lord of the Rings movies. A lot of those Marvel movies I loved. Saving Private Ryan. I really loved the recent Dune movies. Maybe some older movies that I loved. Outlaw Josie Wales, Cool Hand Luke, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But the number one movie of all time for me is the original Star Wars. It was the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater. I was 8 years old. And needless to say, it left a pretty huge impression on me. I became a huge Star Wars fan ever since. And to see that movie in a packed movie theater, having to wait in line for hours to get into the movie theater, I didn't know. I had no idea what the movie theater experience was like. I thought all movies were like this. I thought everyone waited in line for multiple hours and that every movie was packed and that people gave standing ovations at the end of the movie. So I didn't know, that it's not really like that all the time, but, yeah, seeing that movie, I think my eyes were wide and my mouth was probably open the entire time watching that movie. And, that's my all-time favorite movie for that experience as well as anything too. I grew up playing video games. Like when they were invented, I grew up like there was an original Pong game, if you know what that is. I had that when I was a kid, and I had all the gaming systems: Atari, Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Intellivision, PS3, PS4. I still have and still will play games on it. And I do a lot of streaming on it as well. I mentioned I'm a huge Star Wars fan. My favorite video games is a Star Wars video game called Battlefront. And my buddy Doug, who I do another podcast with, who was a college roommate of mine, we played the hell out of Battlefront 1 and 2. And we played online with each other, and we actually got pretty good at it. Now, there were some people that could still own us, but I would have to say we're pretty good. We were, at least kind of second level as far as gameplay on that game. And I'm still hoping Battlefield 3 eventually comes out as well. I did love a lot of the sports games, EA, NHL. I love the college football game. Surprisingly, I never really got into Madden, but back in the day, for those of you who remember Tecmo Bowl, I really loved that. And best concert I ever went to, Soundgarden at the Forum. This was obviously before Chris Cornell passed away. I don't think they were promoting an album. They just basically played all their greatest hits, and it was awesome. Soundgarden's one of my favorite bands, and that was probably the best concert that I ever saw. Up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about some movies and why did I decide to get into broadcasting. I'll also tell you how I met my wife. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com, and you will get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Nick in Apple Valley says that we met at Game 2 in the playoffs this year. It was great to meet you, Nick. He says, I'm curious, are you a film lover? What's your favorite genre, favorite films in that genre, favorite director? Love the show and this idea. Looking forward to hearing from you on this topic. Go Kings Go. That was Nick in Apple Valley. So I talked a little bit about movies earlier. My favorite genre, probably not surprising, like sci-fi adventure. I would say probably my favorite director is Ridley Scott. Blade Runner, Alien, Gladiator, The Martian. Love all those movies. And some of his non-sci-fi stuff too. Kingdom of Heaven, Black Hawk Down. Love those movies. Some other directors I like a lot. David Fincher, Michael Mann, Denis Villeneuve. So those are some of my favorite directors. Bill in Rialto checks in. He says, I would love to know what made you get into sports broadcasting in general. Did you go to school for this? Were you into radio broadcasting previously? And my follow-up question is, how much time a week do you usually spend making the podcast, including research and things like that? Do you read from a script or usually have bullet points? It seems there is never a pause or hesitation during your podcast between subjects and always sounds smooth in all the ways through. Good stuff. Do you usually do one take? And that was from Bill in Rialto, as my phone is blowing up here for some reason. Sorry about that if you heard that. Yeah, I would say, how did I get into sports broadcasting or broadcasting as a career? When I was about 12, I became just a sports obsessed kid. Watching sports, playing sports, it's all I wanted to do. And I remember my dad telling me one time, I'm pretty sure he didn't come up with this saying, but it was like something like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And he was pretty much right. I don't really feel like I've had jobs early on in my life that were not fun. But as far as like after college, my careers, it's pretty much been a lot of stuff I really just enjoy doing, including stuff like this. So I knew I wanted a job in sports, and broadcasting was my first choice. And lucky enough, that's been my only, career that I've had. I haven't had to like change things to this point. And I guess I was talented enough to pull it off for the last 30 years or so. Went to Fresno State. My diploma is a bachelor's of arts degree in telecommunications, which is like radio, TV. I spend, as far as doing this show, including all the research and whatnot, the interview shows are the ones I don't spend as much time on. Obviously, I have to come up with the questions. But I would say 3 or 4 hours on the interview shows from getting the questions, doing the interview, posting it, and then sending it out on all the different places we have to send it out to. Those are the easier ones. Probably just your general shows, I probably spend 5 or 6 hours on, and that doesn't include watching the games during the season. So I put a lot of work into it, and I hope it shows. I do have bullet points on my screen that I am reading from, but when I'm reading emails or if I'm doing an ad read, obviously that's verbatim reading straight from a script. I do it all in one take. I don't edit. I just did a show recently where I had 4 different Locked On hosts talking about the guys we picked up in the off season. Those are all recorded at different times because those hosts had different times when they were available. And I did edit that all together and I thought it went pretty well. And so I might be doing a little bit more of that kind of thing going forward. John, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this last name correctly. John, is it Hambolic? Jacob. Did I say John? Jacob Hambolic. Sorry, Jacob. He says, grateful to have had a chance to meet you previously. We met before a playoff game in 2024 when you hosted some listeners at the bowling alley across from the arena. I remember that very, very well. I said we got a chance to chat a little bit about both of us hailing from Central California and mutual appreciation for Fresno State Go Dogs. My question to you is somewhat hockey related, but more as it applies to the Valley. What are your thoughts on how to grow hockey in smaller, non-traditional areas? Fresno has only one ice rink open year-round, and many towns throughout the Valley have no ice at all. What options could the Kings or even the dreaded Sharks employ to attract more fans and potential hockey players from the Central Valley or other nearby areas? Little to no hockey footprint. As an aside, I am good friends with one of the coaches on the Fresno Junior Monsters youth hockey team, so your perspective may even make it into some of their initiatives to grow their organization. And that again was from Jacob, I assume somewhere in the Central Valley, perhaps. It's a great question. I think part of my hockey culture growing up was the Fresno Falcons, which unfortunately are no more minor league hockey. I was always hopeful the Sharks would move their AHL affiliate there, but it doesn't look like that's ever going to happen. I grew up in a little town in the Valley called Porterville. We didn't have an ice rink. Many of those smaller towns like that don't. I think there's one in Bakersfield. There's one in Fresno, and that's about it as far as the Central Valley goes. I will say, and you mentioned Fresno State, you probably know well that the Fresno State brand is a huge brand in the Valley. If there could be a decent Fresno State hockey club team that was supported, maybe that could help. I know they do have a club team. I've even bought some of their merch to help them out and support them. I assume it's still going on, but it's not, it's not something that's very well known. It's really tough to grow hockey in places where you just have no ice rink. There are a few I think the only guy I can think of that's come from that kind of area is Dustin Wolf, the goalie from the Calgary Flames, is from Gilroy. I assume he probably played hockey somewhere in the Bay Area. The reality is that, if you're a kid who grows up in a non-traditional hockey area, the reality is you probably got to travel somewhere to go and extend your career. It's just hard to grow the game in places like that. Gary from Royally Quacked, that's the podcast where he and his son, the Ducks fan, Gary being the Kings fan, have appeared on their podcast a couple times. Good guys. Even the son, who's a Ducks fan. He says, love your shows. Curious what basketball jersey gift you threw out. Was it from Doug? Inquiring minds want to know. All right, this is from an old story. I don't know where or when I might have mentioned this, but when I worked at Fox Sports Radio, I was known as the hockey guy. So anytime there was hockey talk involved, I was in the middle of it. Usually Stanley Cup Finals, they talk a little bit of hockey. So I used to work with an old radio legend out of Cincinnati. His name was Andy Furman. And during the 2014 Stanley Cup Finals, and radio shows will do this to try and get people interested in something they might not be interested in, we had a bet on the finals outcome. If the Rangers won, I would have had to have bought him a New York Rangers jersey. If the Kings won, he had to buy me a Kings jersey. Well, of course, we made the bet, and then I demanded he pay up, and he did with a Kings jersey. The problem was it was a Sacramento Kings basketball jersey. He thought that was a very funny prank. It was a Jimmer Fredette Sacramento Kings basketball jersey. If you remember that guy, former BYU legend. And I was not amused. And I literally took the jersey from his hand and threw it right in the trash can. And I was told later one of my coworkers did dig the jersey out of the trash can because I left it there. I don't know what he did with it, and I don't care. And yes, I am still bitter that he did not buy me my Kings jersey. Scott Nanheim says, where did you meet your wife? How long have you been married? Kids? What does your wife do for a job? And if your wife showed up with an Edmonton Oilers jersey on, would you divorce her? Met my wife at a birthday party for a coworker of ours. We've been married for, I think it's 17 years coming up in November. And you say, you think? Luckily, she is as bad as remembering numbers, and even she's forgotten our anniversary, and I've had to remind her about it. So that's how much we care about our anniversary. It sounds bad, but actually, I think it's actually pretty cool. We're just not that really into that kind of thing. But anyway, we do not have any kids. We do have a couple of pets. That's a question coming up. My wife was a special needs teacher for many, many years. She recently retired early and is kind of enjoying the good life. Unfortunately, right now, she's almost working a full-time job helping out with her mom and her sister who are ill. And she was helping out her dad who passed away not long ago. If she showed up with an Oilers jersey, that would be pretty shocking because she hates the Oilers as much as I do. But I would not divorce her, but I would be very, very disappointed. And by the way, happy birthday, Karen. As I am recording this, today is her birthday. We've got some more questions coming up, including questions about my hockey career. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Andy in Guelph up in Canada checking in. He says, honest opinion of your Steelers for this upcoming season. The Steelers will have a winning record because Mike Tomlin, their head coach, has never had a losing record. They will make the playoffs and probably lose in the first round, kind of like the Kings. The Steelers have lost 5 straight playoff games in the opening round. They picked up Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback. I am not excited about that, but at the same time, he's better than any other options they were going to have at quarterback. So I'll just have to see. I'll hope for the best, not expecting a lot. I'll just continue watching my favorite player, TJ Watt, and love watching him sack the quarterback. But I think they'll be okay, but I don't see them being any kind of a contender this year. Brian in Tampa says, every once in a while, I can hear your dog's collar shake in the background. Can you give us a scouting report of your dog's name and stats? How were they drafted into your family? And is she a playmaker or more of a grinder power forward type? Well, we have 2 dogs. They are both in the room with me right now, sleeping. I'll attempt to see if one of them wants to come on the show here on the YouTube show, but I'm guessing no. They're both rescue dogs. The older female is named Adeline. We call her Addie. The younger male is Herbie, named after Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert. Addie is very sweet, very quiet, very drama-free. She's the Anjay Kopitar. You never have to worry about her. She's always reliable. Herbie is a Brad Marchand type. You love him, but he can be annoying at times. He does like to bark. He can be crabby. But unlike Brad Marchand, he's actually very, very cute, which is why he was adopted. So yeah, they're always in the room here when I'm recording, and they are both sleeping right now. Let me try real quick. Let's see what the reaction is here. Herbie. Herbie. Come here. Come here. Oh. All right. For you watching on YouTube, here is little Herbie. Oh, my name's in the way. He's like, what are you doing to me? So here's Herbie. He is super, super cute, but he's also very, very temperamental sometimes. Sometimes he can be a little grump. And now we're going to put him back down and he can go back to bed. There you go. Good boy. All right. Addie is way back in the corner over here, and she's not going to move. But anyway, let's see. Okay, here we go. We've got 4 emails, all kind of related to the same thing. So I'm going to read them all together and then answer it in one big answer. Brian in Los Alamitos says, I have heard you mention that you play beer league hockey. At what age did you start playing? What position do you play? And how expensive is hockey equipment nowadays? When I was in high school in the 90s, I was interested in becoming a goalie until I saw how much the equipment was. The pads alone were $2,000. That's when I told myself, never mind, I'm just going to be a fan. That was Brian in Los Alamitos. Jason in Redondo Beach says, I wanted to ask you if you're still playing hockey. If so, where at? And if not, why? We played against each other at Bay Harbor. I was on the Blueberry Bulldogs, and we met at the Kings game a couple of seasons ago. Keep up the great work. Look forward to a great Kings season and to see you on the ice. Ben in Fullerton says, I remember you saying you played beer league hockey, and I was wondering what your setup was. I wanted to know what stick you use, what skate you're using, and any other gear you wanted to share. And Kevin Courier in Palm Springs says, I've been a Kings fan off and on since the early 70s, even before the legendary great announcer Bob Miller. It was Jig McDonald back then. I just watched your most recent fan feedback show. You mentioned playing in a beer league. I was wondering what position you played. For some reason, you seem like a goaltender to me. Thanks. I really enjoyed the show and admire you having the courage to state your honest opinions. P.S. I never liked the Forum blue and purple, or the Forum blue and gold, purple he has in parentheses, back in the day. All right. So thank you to Brian, Jason, Ben, and Kevin. Kevin, although I totally disagree with you about the Forum blue and gold, love those uniforms. I don't hate the silver and black, but I would like to see some more color. And also, Kevin, you could not be more wrong about me being a goalie. I cannot speak as far as how much goalie gear costs, but it is, I'm sure, very expensive. I've never, ever had any desire to be a goalie. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of think those guys are a little bit nuts that play that position. So I started playing roller hockey in college, thanks to my roommate, Gary, who I hope to do an interview with at some point soon. When I moved to LA in my mid-20s, I started playing ice hockey. I've been playing ever since until this past November when I lost my full-time job. So we had to start budgeting our funds a bit, and hockey is expensive, whether you're a goalie or not. And so I haven't played since November. I am very much a defensive defenseman. I play bronze or copper level. Okay slap shot, very average speed, pretty good hockey sense. I would say I'm above average passer. I've been playing for now 30 years. I bought 2 sets of equipment in my entire 30 years of playing hockey. I used my first set of gloves, elbow pads, shin guards, hockey pants, helmet, and skates until I had to replace them due to the wear and tear. I'm now on my second full set of gear, and that same principle will apply. I'm really particular about my equipment. I hate breaking in new gear. It's like an old baseball glove. It just feels right, but eventually everything wears out in time. So as far as prices, I never bought the best of anything. I would get probably middle of the road stuff because I wasn't good enough. Look, I could have $5,000 skates on or $300 skates on, and my skating's going to be the same, frankly. It's not going to matter to somebody like me. So you're talking about $100 for a stick, a little bit more. I never really paid more than around $100 for a stick because, again, it didn't really matter with my game. You're talking $200 to $300 for skates, $200 for a helmet with a cage or a visor, which I would recommend. Gloves are $75 to $100. Shoulder pads are probably $100 to $150. Shin guards are about $100. Elbow pads are probably $50 to $100. So you're talking about $1,000 easy worth of equipment, non-goalie equipment. And then league fees are going to be at least $500 per season. And then you still have to buy a jersey and socks, stick tape, mouth guard, water bottle, all that kind of stuff. So it is an investment and it is not cheap, but it is very, very fun. I recommend it to anyone. Honestly, even if you're a lower level, it will help your appreciation of what these guys do so much. It will help your knowledge of the game, the things you'll pick up that you never maybe noticed seeing, you'll see because you're trying to do it and you're skating. So if you can afford it, I highly recommend it. I love playing sports my whole life. I played high school sports at a decent level. And playing hockey is the most fun I ever had. I really would have loved to have been a kid growing up somewhere where they had high school hockey and doing that. That'd have been a blast. Let's squeeze in a couple of more. Kevin in Salt Lake City says, what have been some of your favorite places to travel for general leisure and vacations? Also curious on what cities make for a good visit for an NHL game based on your experience. Any places that stand out in general? Also, what would some places you'd like to travel be that you haven't been to? So my wife and I have traveled internationally twice. She picked London, Paris, and Croatia on one trip. And I picked Sydney, Australia. Both trips were amazing. It's now her turn to pick. She wants to go back to Europe. And the place that I would like to go to next is Japan. We'll see if it happens. As far as places I've seen NHL games, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Chicago, Vancouver, Las Vegas, New York, of course, Anaheim, San Jose, and of course, LA. Of all those places, I probably like New York the best as far as going to an old place like Madison Square Garden. I used to love the Igloo in Pittsburgh. Totally understand why they tore it down and why they needed to, but that was a really cool place. Vancouver is a gorgeous city. Vegas, as much as I hate the Golden Knights, pretty great atmosphere for a hockey game as well. Places I'd like to go see a hockey game. Montreal probably would be at the top of the list. I'd like to go to Seattle and see a game. I think that would be really cool as well. Also, I'm a history guy, so I usually try and incorporate some sort of history kind of a thing when we go on our vacations. DC was an obvious one to see all the monuments and the museums. When we went to France, we went to Normandy and saw Omaha Beach, went to the American Cemetery where parts of Saving Private Ryan were filmed. Went to Gettysburg on one of our Pittsburgh trips. Also, when we were in New York and Pennsylvania, we went to the 9/11 and the Flight 93 museums, which were all very moving places to visit. Final question is a very specific one from Frank in Ranchos Palos Verdes. 3 favorite breakfast places in San Pedro, which is where I live. Mine are the Pacific Diner, the Lighthouse, and the Omelet House on Gaffey. That was from Frank in RPV. Sadly, Frank, even though breakfast food is my favorite food, I rarely get to eat it. I had very odd working hours for many, many years and just kind of didn't fit in my schedule. I have had breakfast at the Pacific Diner and I liked it. Everydayer Rick here in San Pedro met me for a delicious breakfast burrito at the Churi Man, which is the 3 blocks away from my house. I've always wanted to try that omelet and waffle shop on Gaffey, but I have yet to do so. Maybe you and I, Frank, can meet for some breakfast there at the omelet and waffle shop on Gaffey Street. I enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Maybe it's something we do once every off season. If you like this, thank you to everyone, obviously, who submitted a question. It was fun. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about your host of Locked On LA Kings. That will do it for today's show for you everydayers, those that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. We do have an update on one of our scheduled interviews for this week. Former Kings GM Mike Fuda had to reschedule, so we're planning on having him next week. Josh Schaefer will still scheduled to join us for this week, so that'll be our interview this week. And of course, we have our fan feedback show coming up on Friday. If you want to get an email in for that, the email address is always lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You're always welcome to post your thoughts if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. Stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. And if you want more LA Kings coverage and to support your host, send me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com. I would be more than happy to pass along the details on that. Again, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.